Hey everyone, welcome to this week's episode of the Bitterfly podcast with me, your host, Emily Altoboli. This week's episode is about your abortion story. It is a documentary compilation of 7 courageous women who decided to share their story with me. It's not easy to share your abortion story. There is so much nuance involved in the experience of choosing an abortion. So as you listen to this, listen with compassion. Let's try to leave politics, religion, preconceived notions of any kind behind and just hear people for where they're at and the experiences they've had. This episode is an interesting commentary on female autonomy, and I feel so lucky that these stories were shared with me. It's not often that you get to hear someone sit down and explain from start to finish. I hope in the future we create a world with less stigma and more support so women can continue to share these kinds of stories. And hopefully by the end, you have a better understanding of the context or maybe an understanding of the details involved should you ever find yourself needing to make that decision. Maybe this information will help you support a loved one in the future. This episode is dedicated to all uterus owners, past, present, and future, who made the difficult decision to have an abortion. We support you. The Bitterfly Podcast. Knowledge is food, bitches. Eat up.
I always just kind of associated it with like, oh, you fucked up, like that's kind of like something that you may have to deal with.
I think at that time, when you're in a relationship, you're like, oh, it's never going to happen to me. It's never going to happen to me.
But, you find yourself pregnant and you're like, well, turns out I need an abortion.
Check me at the clinic, Planned Parenthood, what's up?
So it was never for me like a question of, do I do this or not? I always just knew that it was the right choice.
That decision is not an easy decision to make. I think people who maybe feel like abortion's not the answer, I just don't think they understand. And it's a fucking hard decision and it's okay. And it happens and you move on with your life.
Honestly, my memory of it was like a sleepover.
I've had an abortion. Have you?
I was always pro-choice for everybody. And I think I still have that standpoint. Before I was very open-minded, but I think I was under the impression I would never have to do it or it would never, happen to me. So when I had to make that choice, I think it was a lot more personal and different. A lot of like societal shame and family shame and all of that really affected me.
Guess I never really thought about it that much until the situation came up. I do think that I was pro-choice my entire life. I just thought that I would never get into a situation that I would need one.
Abortion always seemed like a scary thing. It seemed like a very extreme procedure that it's very traumatic, painful. Yeah, a lot of fear behind abortion. Also knowing it was a normal thing to happen, I think the stigma behind it definitely made it seem scary and not approachable.
A very emotional process. It was something that women were told to fear, just with our education all in high school and everything. It's, that dreaded thing that you don't want to happen, getting pregnant and getting the dreaded abortion.
I was just kind of under the impression that I would never have to get one. I wouldn't get pregnant because I was on birth control. Just growing up, I just thought like people got pregnant when they tried to get pregnant. If you wanted a baby, you would try to have a baby and then you would have a baby. And that's just not how it works.
I never really thought about it. I was kind of old when I did wind up being in a situation where I needed to get an abortion. I was like, damn, really? Like now in my life?
I had friends in high school who had had abortions, and that I always thought was like a great decision for whoever, whatever you decide. I think that's the important thing, as long as it's what's right for you.
It was not the case of abortion is very bad, you never do it. It was, this is this is something that's available. And, if you ever find yourself in a situation, let's talk about it.
When I had my abortion, I was 21 years old, definitely in a party phase. I had just started dating someone new, found out I was pregnant from someone else. Yeah, and it was a really easy, quick decision for me that it just needed to be done. Luckily, I was right at 4 weeks or 5 weeks or so. So I found out really quick and was able to just take the pill, abortion pill. The whole process was pretty seamless. I don't know. It wasn't as scary as it's built up to be.
I always just kind of associated it with like, oh, you fucked up, like that's kind of like something that you may have to deal with, but like if you don't fuck up, you don't have to deal with it. Both my mom and my grandma are health professionals, so they're like, and my grandma is an OBGYN. She like has delivered many babies. She's a nurse practitioner. So I was on birth control really early. Like they were like, just take birth control. You know what I mean? Like they weren't trying to hide anything from me. They weren't telling me anything was like a bad or a wrong decision. So I'm like super blessed in that regard that like even when I did have that experience and I did have to go get an abortion, I felt comfortable to tell my family. There was never like, we're going to disown you or like you're, committing a sin. Like it was never like that. So they were actually some of the only people that I told at first.
I was 19 and graduated high school, kind of just like starting life. Like you think you're an adult, but you're really like still a kid. I had a boyfriend who I had been with for like a year and a half. We were hanging out one night. He like asked me like a really stupid question, like, "What would you say if I became a dad?" And I was like, "Why would you become a dad? Like I'm not pregnant." And he goes, "Well, like what would you say?" And I was like, I don't know. Like, that's such a weird question. Like, I don't even know why we're talking about this. He like sits up and he like looks at me and he goes, I got a girl pregnant. And so he like in that moment, like all these things were in my mind. I was like, whoa, like we're in a relationship. Like, what is this about? And there was like a moment, like a couple months prior that we broke up for a little bit of time. And we got back together like later on. But during that time that we broke up, he was hooking up with like all these people. Well, there's one girl that he hooked up with and she got pregnant and that she didn't know what she was going to do. Here I am in a relationship with this guy and he's like, I'm finding out that he just got another girl pregnant. Because at that time, right, I'm thinking he's my future. Like we have a future together. Didn't really know how to digest it. Fast forward a little bit, she decides she wants to keep the baby. I kind of have to decide, like, what does this mean for me and this relationship? Well, like I'm a ride or die almost too much because I decided to stick it out with him. And I'm like, you know what? I like convinced myself we were broken up. Like I was doing my own thing. He was doing his own thing. So like something came about it. Like I'm making the decision to stay with him. Kind of fast forward. I wasn't on birth control. We were not using protection. Like we were just pulling out. And that was like the thing. I think at that time, when you're in a relationship, you're like, oh, it's never going to happen to me. It's never going to happen to me. I remember like I hadn't gotten my period for a while and I was just like, oh, like I must just be late. I must just be late. I went to Planned Parenthood. I just heard like, oh, Planned Parenthood, like they're super awesome. Even if you don't have insurance, like you can get, whatever help you needed. I didn't have anybody come with me. Like I'm a very private person. And they're like, hey, well, are you like sexually active? And I was like, yeah, I am. And I had just like became like in that year, like in that relationship with him. And so I take all the tests and I go into this room and this lady's kind of just asking me questions, like very casually asking me questions. And she goes, oh, pregnancy test just came back and you're positive. You're pregnant. And I just remember feeling like the room was like coming in on me. She tells me that I'm 8 weeks. And so I was like, oh my gosh, I'm far along. So my boyfriend already has another girl pregnant and now here I am pregnant. She's like, do you want to keep it? And I just was like, I don't know if I can answer that question right now. I didn't have insurance. And so I left there with all this information and then me knowing that I'm pregnant. So the first thing I did was I called my best friend. And so she was the very first person I told before my mom, before my boyfriend. to me, he was not my safe space. It's our body. And so, we're the ones that at the end of the day need to make the decision.
I kind of knew that I was pregnant maybe like 2 weeks before I missed my period, just because like the changes in my body were different than they would be if it was just PMS. I was like, oh yeah, my tits are sensitive. This is weird. Like I felt a lot of symptoms. Like, my breasts were changing. I was like craving things all of the time and like hungry all of the time. If I had a thought about a food, I would need it before I could like even do anything. So I was like so moody, so hormonal. I was like, oh, it's fine. I'm just going to start my period. Then I was like 5 days late and I was like, okay, this is like normal. It's not like out of left field that I would be 5 days late. Then I was 9 days late and I was like, oh yeah, something's definitely up. So at that point I talked to the guy and I was just like, hey, like things are definitely different. I was like, it's not unlikely that I'm pregnant right now. I was like, whatever happened, I was like, I'll take a test. Whatever happens, like I want to get an abortion, period. I was just like, no questions. Like this guy, I guess we need a name for him. Bill. He was totally supportive, same deal. He was just like, oh yeah, I also don't know if I even want children. I don't know if like, it's definitely not a thing I want right now. Obviously, whatever you choose, I'll support. So basically we were both on the same page, like if it happens, abortion. So I took a pregnancy test on what would have been my 12th day late of my period. It was positive, and it was kind of funny taking the test because like I was just like, please don't be it, even though like I was fully expecting to be pregnant. And like I peed on the stick, the pregnant line immediately went. Like I've taken pregnancy tests before. I always am just like, like waiting in anticipation. And the second line will go and the pregnant line doesn't go. This time it went immediately. And I was like, great. Here we are, confirmed. So immediately after that, I called the Planned Parenthood of the Rockies clinic, talked to them, made my appointment. It was all good. They had like an opening the following week. After I did all that, I texted Bill and I was like, hey, do you want to get a beer later? So we went to the restaurant, and I broke it to him in like the best way for me and maybe for us, but it was definitely like a traumatic thing for him. I think he was more traumatized than I was. And I was just like, so I am pregnant. The abortion is scheduled. Do you want a shot? I could tell like he looked like he was about to have diarrhea in his pants. And like I reassured him. I was like, the abortion is scheduled. It's going to be taken care of. Let's relax. I actually said, let's poison this thing. And then we proceeded to get wildly drunk.
I had graduated college and everything, but I was really trying to figure out where do I go from here, because you don't make a lot of money with my degree. So it was like, where do I go? What do I do? And I got back with an ex who was very, very toxic. Was still married, but separated. We started hanging out again. Like as soon as I knew what I had to do. So it was never for me like a question of, do I do this or not? I always just knew that it was the right choice. But it still was very, very difficult to follow through with, and then to the aftermath of it as well. I didn't want to tell him because I knew the type of person he was. He already had a kid from his marriage, or whatever you want to call it. And the way that he interacted with his kid and the way that he interacted with me and treated me, I was like, I don't want to have a child with this person. He told me like he would marry me, take care of me, do all these things for me, and that he wanted another baby and just all this stuff. And I just like told him from the beginning, like, I didn't even want to tell you because I figured this would happen, but like, this is my choice and I've made this choice for myself, and this is what I'm going to do. It was difficult. My sister is also pretty against abortion, my oldest sister, and she was pregnant at the time with her first kid, my first niece and nephew. And so that was hard because I would see her like growing and having this pregnancy, and she got the books that like showed you like at this stage this is what they're at, and I couldn't like tell her anything because I was afraid of how she would respond and like treat me. So I kept that a secret from her. To this day she doesn't know that I had one. But I called my other older sister, and she's like in the middle of us. But she actually pushed me to do it because I wasn't financially stable. I wasn't in a good place mentally. So it was like, if you're gonna have this kid, like what is it gonna do to you? So she kind of like pushed me in that direction, which was hard because I had, one person telling me keep it, and like feeling the pregnancy. It was hard because I was like, oh, maybe I should. But I knew what path it would take me down and where I would be, especially with this person. Called a few days after I found out to schedule the appointment. And I just had to wait a week. So it wasn't too long, but I think waiting a week with like something growing in your stomach and feeling the symptoms and working with kids, it was just really hard to wait for that.
So when I found out I was pregnant and realized I needed an abortion, I was a sophomore in college, and I was dating a guy at the time who was very physically abusive. He actually sent me to the hospital 3 times, twice with broken cheekbones, once with a punctured lung. And so I was incredibly broke, in like the worst place I've ever been in my life. And the thought of raising a child with this person was like the scariest thought I've ever had. I knew that at the time there was no way possible that I could raise a child or bring a child into this world that could possibly be similar to him in those actions. And I just couldn't support a child whatsoever. I was actually getting my undergrad in psychology, finally deciding I wanted to become a nurse. And I remember Googling if you can go to nursing school pregnant or with a child. And majority of firsthand experiences said that most of the mothers dropped out when they had an infant. I also just couldn't afford a house for myself. And so the thought of affording a house and food and diapers, all the things you need, was just out of the window. So
I was broke. Like I was working 2 jobs, and like I barely had money, and like I shouldn't be 19 and not having insurance. Like that was my first order of business. And that experience was terrible. Like I had to go down to the DSHS office. I waited for like 3 hours. You have to answer all these questions. And they'd ask me like, why do you want insurance now? And I just straight up was like, I'm pregnant. I need insurance. So once I got the insurance, I was like, okay, now is the time that I need to kind of like let people know. He was like over the moon excited. And I was like, no, like, why are you excited? You already have a kid on the way. And now your girlfriend, like your actual girlfriend, is pregnant. And I don't even know what to do because of this current situation. I had just told him, like, at the end of the day, like, this is a decision that I'm going to make and you're going to have to respect it. I didn't even allow him to give me his opinion initially when I told him because I didn't feel like he had the right. Like, at this point, you don't have the right to tell me what you want. He lived like with his parents, and I was trying to get out of living at home. And so I was doing my thing. I was grinding, and he was just a lazy ass. That was the other thing. Like, where do you think like you have one on the way? Like, I don't even know. You don't even have a job at this time. Like, what are you thinking? I ended up telling my mom and kind of talking to her about both like outcomes. What happens if I keep it? What happens if and kind of learning from her experience too. Like, she was able to open up a little bit more about her experience with abortion. I was at a point where I needed to make the decision pretty fast because the only option I had was a medical abortion. I only had a short window to do that. Otherwise, I was gonna, have to keep the baby. You think that you're able to make that decision on your own, but you do kind of need someone to talk to. And I actually went to this women's clinic in Seattle. They had both styles of abortion. They provided birth control, and it was just an all women's clinic. So men, they didn't even help men. It was just women. So I felt very comfortable. Like I found a place that would really help me because I needed to understand like the medical things too. So I found out I was pregnant at 8 weeks, and it took me I would say about a month or a little over a month for me to get insurance with the state. It's a very long process. It's not like an immediate thing. And so now I'm 12 weeks or more. I think it was like 12, 13 weeks, which is pretty far along. I actually remember I started getting like morning sickness. Like I would be throwing up in the mornings. I also remember getting like feeling the feeling of my stomach actually just being like hard, like kind of creating the space for the baby, like the way your body is supposed to. And so by the time I went to this clinic to be able to have a consult and make the right decision, they had told me that I'm too far along for a pill abortion, that it had to be a medical procedure. I was leaning more towards abortion. And that decision is not an easy decision to make. I think people who maybe feel like abortion's not the answer, I just don't think they understand. And so I always feel like everyone's story is so important. And that's kind of why, with my story, I feel like it's so important to understand all the aspects. So I was raised by a single mom. I had a boyfriend who already had a kid on the way. I've always had the thought in my head, I want a better life for myself than my mom gave for me. And we talked about this, and it's nothing against how I was raised. It's just that I saw what it was like to have an absent dad, and I saw what it did to me, and how it affected me. And I saw those things, and I knew when I was growing up that that's not what I want for myself and my family and my children. If I can prevent that, like I want to work towards having a family, a healthy relationship with somebody that's hopefully my husband, or just someone that I know that I'm going to be with for a very long time. I came to the decision to have an abortion because that was what was best for me. Like I could barely take care of myself almost. Like I was just getting by, working two jobs, 19. Like it just didn't sound like I laid it out in my head, like what would the future look like for this child? And I didn't feel like I could provide.
Yeah, I was a junior in college, fully financially dependent on my dad, and I enjoyed life, and like there was just no way. The only place I knew that did abortions was like Planned Parenthood, because you hear about that. So I called them like the next day, scheduled an abortion for the next week, and I chose a medicated abortion, which is with you take two separate pills. One of them stops the pregnancy from progressing, and the other one causes contractions. So you just kind of like expel everything. And I was only 6 weeks pregnant. And so that was that experience. And it actually was only 2 or 3 months later with the same boyfriend, we had stayed together and everything, where I found out I was pregnant for the second time. So that experience was kind of similar. I mean, we weren't planning on it. I didn't want it. So the first time I got pregnant, I had been on birth control pills since I was 15. So I'd been on them for 5 years. Right before I got pregnant, I actually had something called rhabdomyolysis, and I was in the hospital for 5 days. And that's really, really damaging to your kidneys, and it's hard on your liver. So they stopped me on my birth control, like stopped me for the 5 days I was there, and then told me I could get back on it when I left the hospital. So I did, but it was like within weeks after that I got pregnant for the first time. So I think that's what kind of messed that up. And then the second time, even looking back, I cannot think of what happened to where I got pregnant. I mean, we were having sex, obviously. We were having sex often. I was on birth control both times, but I think the first time there was a mess up. And I found out pretty immediately the second time too, within, a day or two of my period being late. I vividly remember taking a test at like 6 in the morning because I had to get to campus for a really early biology lab. So I just texted the picture to my boyfriend and like got on the bus and got to school. Like didn't have time to talk with him with it until like that evening. He basically was like, "Yeah, let's get another abortion." And I was like, "But maybe we should have a baby. Like this is the second time this has happened." And like I knew in the back of my mind I wanted to have an abortion again because there was just no way. But when I having some, more feelings about it this time than the last time, which is so normal, he freaked out and told me that if I was going to have this baby, he was going to leave me and I was going to be a single mom and like all this stuff, like just completely unsupportive of like any, and like I didn't want to keep the pregnancy. I wanted to have an abortion, but he wouldn't even sit with me through any feelings. So that was really hard. I didn't want to do a medical abortion again because that was really difficult. It was painful for one, and you can take ibuprofen and everything, but like it is very strong period like cramps. So it's pretty painful. And mine went pretty smoothly, but I was like, well, maybe this time I'll have the surgical abortion just so it's like in and out. I don't have to like deal with the pain of it. I like researched a place that does surgical abortions and I found a really great clinic, and that was like my first experience seeing or hearing other stories of abortions. They had kind of like a scrapbook in their lobby of people who had written them thank you notes. And so that was like super comforting just to read those notes, knowing that other people had been in that situation before. So I had the surgical abortion at 7 weeks, was my second abortion. It went great. I was feeling nervous. And so they gave me like a Xanax when I got there. And they gave me like some pain medication via a shot, which was great. And they were all just so kind. And so it was just a great experience. And then after that, I went back to that clinic and got the Mirena IUD just to extra make sure that it was not going to happen again.
I had just taken my IUD out because I was like, I don't want to be on birth control. Like I felt a lot of my friends who had been on it for as long as me were starting to get like negative side effects from it, like whether it's, fibroids or just bad things were happening to cysts, all types of stuff. And I was like, I don't I don't think this is a good thing to leave inside of me for this long. And like was on it for like 8 years or something like that. And so like I didn't have a period for 8 years and I was starting to feel weird about that. I was just took it out. Actually, my grandma took it out for me. So I was fine for like a few months, and then I kind of just like had a situation where I had unprotected sex. I thought it would be fine, was not, absolutely not fine. And it was also somebody that like I had just met. I didn't really know them that well, and the decision, I mean, leading up to even finding out that I was pregnant, I like cut off this person from like having access to me because they were starting to be a little bit crazy towards me. Like they were lying to me about like their work and their living situation, just very basic things that like you don't lie to people about. And then there was a day where I started to think like, am I pregnant? Because like my boobs got like hella bigger and like were painful. And I was like, oh my God, am I pregnant? So I was starting to feel that way and I was feeling anxious about it. And I didn't have a car at that time and I was working from home and I live in the suburbs. So it's like not easy to like go to the store. And so this person had a car and I asked them, "Can you bring me a pregnancy test?" He started to be really mean to me, honestly. He called me a baby killer literally for just saying that I had anxiety about potentially being pregnant. He was like, "Okay, I gotta go get food," and like hung up the phone and got off the phone. And I was like really offended. So I wound up just going to get it myself later. I didn't answer when he called me back later. And he called me like 85, 90 times in like a couple hours. And I had gone to my friend's house for lunch. And he was calling me saying he was gonna break into my house and all that. Like it was wild, violent. Like I have a video of him he called me on FaceTime and he's outside of my apartment with the hand rake from the garden, like acting like he's gonna break into my house. And I'm just like, that's fine. You're not gonna control me with like this like weird fear thing that you're doing. And then I was like, I really can't talk to this person anymore. And I just like cut them off after that day. And I was like, don't come to my house. Don't talk to me. Don't call me. Like, just goodbye. Good riddance. Peace be with you. Then I found out after that I was pregnant and I was like, I most certainly do not want to be like bound to this person forever. That sounds horrible. Like I was getting really sick from being pregnant, like would think about this person and like become even more sick. Like I was like, I can't, like I absolutely can't like there's no possible way that this could ever be an option. So I told my family, because of the amount of money that I was making through my job at the time, it was going to be like pretty expensive, over $600, $700. I'm like, I didn't just have a bunch of money saved up. I was paying off a lot of debt at the time. And so, like, I talked to my grandma who retired from working at this place, but she worked there for a long time. It was like a private practice OBGYN place, and her friend did my abortion for me, like, on her lunch break, and they gave me like a discounted fee. And like, my grandma came with me. It was like, I feel like I had like a really best case scenario. Like, it was not scary. I was really happy. My grandma really plugged me, and they like did it for like less than half the cost.
So I called the clinic, and it was so simple, eerily simple, but that was, I guess, the nice part about it. There was like no judgment. It was specifically a clinic for these things. They told me, I would come in and I would need someone there with me just in case, to make sure. So my sister said she would go with me, and that it was 500, which is a lot. So I had told him, he said he would split it with me, but he ended up like giving me money, and then I gave it back because he needed it for bills or something, and I felt bad.
Drained my bank account and ended up being $600. My boyfriend did not offer to help pay for it. So I paid, this is also a very strong memory for me. I paid $600, and that was like all the money I had. I was working part-time as a nanny, so I didn't have any money, and I paid that amount. 2 days later, I went and filled up my car with gas and went to Fred Meyer to get some groceries, and my card was declined.
Bill ended up taking care of the cost for me, and I was just like, tight, thank you. At the end of the day, it's $560 out the door. You pay upon arrival, then you go do the procedure. They called and they told me there's might be protesters outside the building. Don't talk to them. Just drive through the gate and like come in. There's a gate, it's open, but they can't come inside because that would be trespassing. But yeah, there were protesters out there. They're like yelling at you while you're driving up, and it was just like, yep, okay, whatever. Like, I'm gonna go do this. It's too late. I've already decided.
So when I went the day of, there were people outside protesting, which was very frustrating and hurtful. Frustrates me that they would, think they had a choice in that. Such a big decision.
I arrived, checked in. You have like a small consultation with one of their specialists, and they go through the entire procedure with you. They give you a packet, you follow along with the procedure. They like cover all of the risks. They ask you about like kind of your lifestyle and your history. It's very supported the whole way. Like they just want to make sure also that like this is a decision you're making because it's right for you. Are you safe? Like, you're not being pressured into doing this by anyone. This is your choice. And like, at first I was like, oh yeah, I guess I'll do the pill, because the pill option is basically, it induces a miscarriage. So like, just makes you vacate. You're just like having a miscarriage for 5 days. So I called back and I was like, actually, I changed my mind. Can I get the procedure? Because I was like, that's going to be one and done. I'll be able to go back to the comfort of my home, recover. I'm not like purging my uterus for 5 days, which like just seems a little traumatic.
They didn't give me a choice of surgical or a pill. They said because of how far along I was, it would be a pill. So I think it just depends. If you hit like a certain point, then you have to do the surgical. But yeah, for me, it was, they just told me it was a pill. So I think that's why it was cheaper too, is the farther along you get. And on the website, it shows it increases in money. So that's probably why also.
It was actually 2 appointments, like one day, and then I went back the next day. So the first day I went in, and they just, clarified with me that this is what I wanted to do. No one was making me do this, that I was in a safe relationship. And then I took a pill that would stop the pregnancy. So basically, like, stop any growing happening in my uterus. And I was told to come back the next day to pick up the prescription for the pills I would take at home that would start the contractions. I went back the next day, got the pills, and it was 2 pills you put in your cheeks, and they just dissolve over like 30 minutes. And pretty much like 10 minutes after you put them in, and they're like dissolving, you can start feeling the cramps. And I probably bled pretty heavily for a day or two. And the really intense cramps weren't for the whole time. Those were just initially. And then it was kind of just like I had a heavy period for a couple days.
Yeah, it was all very easy. Definitely the pain didn't happen till after the second pill, probably a couple hours into it. It just feels like really extreme cramps. Blood clot comes out of you, and then you're done. It was a lot easier than I was expecting. It was a lot less scary.
Yeah, as far as experience, I was very impressed by my friends' just courage and like reaction throughout the whole thing. Honestly, my memory of it was like a sleepover. I remember we got lots of snacks. We just posted up in the room and I waited outside the bathroom, just sitting on the bed for hours, like checking in every once in a while, giving a knock and making sure that she was doing okay in there. Yeah, just stayed the night and watched movies, a normal sleepover with an added element.
Abortion sleepover.
So they brought me back into like the procedure room. There was a nurse there. She took my vitals again. She put an IV in me. They have you put a maxi pad in your underwear. Then you take off your pants and just like put them over there, and then you put the gown on. And you lay on a bed, and it was actually quite cute. All of the rooms I was in had little like butterfly mobiles up top, so it was cute. It was relaxing. I was nervous, like I was kind of quite nervous the whole time, but I was like, I know this is what I want, so like it'll be okay at the end of the thing. But I was like, I don't know what to expect. So they came back, and the doctor was there. She walked me through again, like what was gonna happen, and she said, I'm gonna be like walking you through while I'm giving the procedure. She's like, not in detail, but like you'll feel pressure now, or those kinds of like light descriptions. They administered the drug in my IV, and I completely blacked out. I don't remember a single thing. They said like, oh yeah, once we see the drug starting to take effect, we'll have you just put your legs up in the stirrups, and then we'll begin to do the procedure once you're like relaxed. Yeah, nothing. Total darkness. I blacked back in. I think maybe after or as I was putting my pants back on, like the nurse was holding me. I don't remember putting my pants on. I'm pretty sure she helped me put my pants back on. Then we like walked out of the procedure room and went into the recovery room. That part was kind of scary just because like I was like not able to walk, and there was like mostly just like from being drugged. I didn't have any pain. Bill came and picked me up. I basically told him before we went in, he's like, okay, just let me know what you need. And I was like, honestly, when you pick me up, have a pizza already ordered so that we can just pick it up on the way home. I was like, I want to eat a slice and then I'm going to go to bed and I want you to leave. And we did exactly that. I just like took it easy the whole day. It was like the day 2 and 3 following the procedure that I started to get more crampy, just because like your uterus was just purged of everything, and you need to start rebuilding that up again and kind of getting back to normal and like coming back down to size because it's changed. I don't know about babies. Did they even give me sex ed? But anyway, yeah, I would say it was only uncomfortable for like 2 or 3 days after the procedure, and they gave me like heavy duty ibuprofen, so I would take one of those every 8 hours and I was feeling good.
I'm lucky enough, wow, why am I so emotional, that my mom was the one who figured out through Planned Parenthood how to do it, the process of it, and she actually brought me to get my abortion, and she paid for it too. I think it was around $250 or something like that. So Planned Parenthood didn't give me a choice on a pill or surgical. I was too far along. My mom and I pulled up to the clinic, and I remember like shaking in the parking lot. And then I went in and I had to fill out paperwork. My mom was holding my hand walking back. this is the part that gets me every time. They weren't very understanding when it came to that I didn't want to see the ultrasound. They asked me if I wanted to, and I said no, because I didn't want to see what I was doing. And they continued to ask me multiple times, kind of making me feel like I was making the wrong decision, honestly. They asked me over and over again. I'm sure I wanted to make this decision. And I kind of actually felt pretty judged by I think she was a nurse that was helping me. But so first I went back to the clinic area, and then we went into a different room where they asked for the third time if I wanted to see the ultrasound, and they took an ultrasound, and I could hear there wasn't a heartbeat, but just the movement of the ultrasound. And even that like got me really thinking if this was the right decision. And then I laid on my back, and they inserted a tube into my vagina and uterus, and it was kind of like a vacuum. And then 5 minutes later, it was done, and I bled for probably a week after. During the procedure, the actual feelings I felt of the per se vacuum was just pressure. They told me to take ibuprofen before I came in. They didn't give me any pain meds. The experience for me was not really what I expected, because I never have had researched how it goes or anything. And I honestly thought that the people at Planned Parenthood would be a lot more understanding, instead of they seemed super biased. The experience wasn't joyful at all. It was pretty heartbreaking. But the thing that made me realize this was the right choice, because I want to be able to love my children fully without any negative emotions towards how they got into this world. The thought of constantly being in contact with their dad for the rest of my life is probably my worst nightmare.
When I got there, I waited in a waiting room. There were other women waiting. There was a younger girl, like probably around my age, or maybe a little younger there as well. And like, I just felt like this weird bond towards her. But I sat there with my sister and we waited, and then you go back alone. They do an ultrasound to just confirm, and like a pee test to confirm that you're pregnant. So I did that, and throughout that process, I think maybe it was the first time that I was really questioning, like, is this the right choice? Am I doing the right thing here? Am I going to regret this? Just because it's the process, and they really put that in your head too. Like, this, once you take this first pill, like there's no going back. You have to complete this. Like, is this something you want to do? And I get that, but all that pressure, like, it was a lot. They do the ultrasound. The nice thing is that the nurse was really nice. She like complimented like that I smelled good, which was interesting. And asked me like, hey, do you want to see the ultrasound? Like, but I chose not to see it because I knew if I did, like, it would be really harder for me to make that choice. So, and then after they confirmed, she told me like, okay, you're this far along. I think I was about 6 weeks, almost 7 weeks along. And so again, they said like, okay, no going back. Like, once you you take a pill there, no reversing that. And if you choose to, like, there could be birth defects, all of these things wrong with the baby. So I was like, no, like, I know I need to just swallow it and get it done. So they had me sign a paper saying like nobody was influencing me, no one was coercing me to do this, that it was of my sound choice, and I wanted to do this myself. Again, like, I was living in my sister's house in a room. Like, I didn't have anything, a career yet. I wasn't making good money. Like, I had a crappy car. Like, I just wasn't in the position to even take care of myself, let alone something else, for such a long time. Yeah, I signed the paper, and then they give you the pill. It's just one pill I swallowed. So you take it there, they make sure you're okay. And then gave me the other pills I would have to take later. So it's about, I think it's 12 hours later, you put these other pills, I think it was 2 pills, you put them like under your tongue or in your cheek, and you have them like dissolve in your mouth, and you have to sit there and let them dissolve fully. And then it really starts the process. I didn't expect it to hurt as bad as it did. And I think that was like one of the harder parts too, is it was incredibly painful. And even with the lower tab, it like did not help at all. really crappy because the dude that I was with, I asked him because it was on his birthday, and I felt really bad about that. And I was like, listen, like, this is the earliest I can get, but like, I understand it's your birthday. Like, I can wait, because I don't think that's fair and whatever. And he was like, no, it's fine, whatever. Well, we're going to go to a baseball game with my parents. And I was like, great. So after having gone and done this and waiting to take the rest of them, I was like at this baseball game with him and his family. So it was just really weird. And then he like wanted to keep celebrating his birthday. So he was like, oh, I want to go to this casino and keep drinking and gambling. So we went there and I told him like, hey, I have to go back and like do this. And he got like, mad at me. We went back to his house and he pretty much fell asleep. And I sat there like by myself, like just like letting this dissolve and like just cried and cried because I think it was that part that was like, okay, this is final. So I took the final 2 pills and I was like waiting for what would happen next, really. And essentially, they told me you'll just start bleeding. So I was kind of just waiting to bleed, like waiting for something to happen. It started to hurt incredibly bad. I got like worse cramps, but 10 times, like in my back and my stomach, just like folded over, crying. I had already took a Loratab pill, like kind of anticipating that it would hurt. I was like keeled over the bathroom, just crying because it hurt so bad, and like throwing up because it hurt so bad. And like the place that he was at didn't really have like the best bathtub. So I was like trying to get a bathtub. I like needed a heating pad, all of these things. And he was just like frustrated that I woke him up because I was like in pain. So I had called my sister crying and I was like, I need to leave. It was probably like 12 or 1 in the morning and it was a weekday. And she was like, don't worry about it. So my sister actually drove and picked me up pretty far to get me and take me to her house or back to my house where I was living with her. She picked me up ice cream. She picked me up a heating pad, like everything. And I just laid on her couch. And she gave me a pair of sweats. I think I had started bleeding at his house. I did. I started bleeding at his house and like really feeling it, knowing like, okay, it's happening. Yeah, so I had gone to the bathroom because I felt like this urge to pee. And when I went to the bathroom, that's when it had fallen out. So it was like the chunk of tissue or the sac or like whatever the tiny little fetus was, it had come out. So that kind of dropped. I think it was in like the pad that I was wearing. And because I think this was like a pretty intense thing for me, was like I had not large by any means. I wasn't really far along, but it was like a chunk of whatever it is. And I like had to pick it up and throw it in the toilet. And I think that was like really, really hard too. I was out of it for like a day and a half, just like incredibly tired, like just so fatigued because I think your body, like, I don't know exactly how it all works, but like just with the cramps and pain and everything, I think my body was just like done. So I slept like the whole next day. And then but after that, like after like the fatigue and the day after, like I was back to normal. Like I didn't hurt at all. Like I wasn't tired. Like I didn't have any other aftermath with it. It was really just like more of the emotional stuff after that.
A medical abortion is very intense, and it's a 2-day procedure. But the first day that I went there, they basically have to prep your body for this type of procedure. And so what they do is they dip these like gauze pads into this certain solution, and they'll put it inside of you, and they let you know like how much is going to go in there and kind of how you're going to start to feel. And that first day, like there's no going back. So if you were to come back the second day and say like, oh, I actually don't want to do this anymore, that's not an option. So the first day they really, they ask you a few times, are you sure this is the right decision for you? I was at peace with my decision to where I could say yes without hesitation. Prepping your body is not just with the gauze pads and the solution. It's also opening you up a little bit to be able to allow them to go in and do the procedure. That took maybe about an hour. And they were telling me like when you go to the bathroom, like it's gonna sting because you're urinating like through the gauze pads, and so the solution's gonna spread more. And that was a good thing that it was spreading more, but it wasn't very comfortable to use the bathroom. So this is 24 hours before the procedure. So that day I just was kind of like lounging around, and you kind of start to feel the feels at that point. Because there is no going back. And I think a couple times throughout the process, I question my decision, like, oh my gosh, I don't think I'm doing the right thing. And so that's tough too, because mentally, you really have to make sure that you know what you're doing and the outcome of it. And so then the next day we go back. My friend picks me up. We drive out there. We go back. The first thing they do though, which it's not the most fun, is they do an ultrasound. So like, but they turn the monitor away so you don't have to look and see it, because that's not something that you want to see. They turn off everything, so you can't hear the heartbeat. You can't hear anything, because at this point there is one, and that's kind of just the reality of the situation. And they bring in all their machines after they do their ultrasound. They make sure that everything is looking good as far as dissolving. They kind of say like things are going to start to dissolve inside of you. And so things were looking good to where they could continue. I wouldn't say that anything severely hurt. Like there was not a mass amount of pain where it was like so traumatic. It was more the sound of the machine, and it's kind of like a suction, and it's just to make sure that everything comes out of your body so there's no residual, because any type of residual. So the noise was the worst part. And I think they had asked me, like, do you want to bring headphones? Like, you can bring headphones, you can listen to something. But I guess I didn't fully understand. But it was pretty loud and it was pretty quick. I would say it was maybe 30 seconds. And you do feel the pressure because something's going inside. And they turn it on and it just kind of sounds like a really loud vacuum. And then you're done.
I could definitely feel that the pain medication was working, but it was still like a lot of pain for me. Like, and it was like in the most intense cramps. It wasn't like really pinching. It was like cramps. Like I wanted to like curl up, and I wanted it to be done immediately. It was a horrible experience. Obviously, like it was very painful for me. That was like I can never do that again. Like it was a horrible pain, and I immediately felt better after.
It was painful. Anybody who's had a surgical abortion or has gone through childbirth knows the pain of having your cervix dilate. I was 7 weeks. So I think they did end up dilating me to like a 6 or 7 centimeters. And they do it very quickly. They do it in a matter of minutes. Like the surgical abortion doesn't take more than like 5 to 10 minutes from start to finish. And so the nurse who was standing next to me, I had my boyfriend on one side of me and a nurse on the other side of me. And she was putting pressure on my abdomen, which felt really nice. And she was like, this will help. And so they were just great there. And once the surgical abortion was done, I had very minor cramps, but no bleeding because they had taken everything out. Like looking back, I would highly recommend surgical abortions just because they're quick. If you want, I'm sure you could get some good drugs to help you through it. And then there's no, you don't have to deal with any bleeding afterwards. And then you do go back, I think a week later, for either situation to take a pregnancy test, or I opted for another ultrasound just to make sure everything was out that needed to be out, and it was.
Right after I was done, they were like, okay, we're all finished. I just started crying, and I was like, I didn't make the right decision. But that was, I think, just the emotion of the process, and not that I didn't make the right decision. So after the procedure was done, they were the ones to really give me my options, like, to prevent something like this in the future. We think that birth control is the best option for you. And so I did end up getting birth control with them, which was like, I just feel like it was such a great thing. And I'm really happy that they were there, and they provided me all the right resources. They provided me the answers to the questions that I had that I guess I just hadn't asked or thought like, maybe I should go see a doctor and talk about birth control.
They have so much good information to like help you make your decision as well. So if you're on the fence, there's lots of resources out there for you.
It definitely was not what I expected. I think like when I had made the appointment, I was worried it would be surgical. It would be like this big thing. And so for it to be so fast, so smooth at the beginning, I was like, I don't know, nervous, but also relieved. But then when I did take the 2 pills later to fully finish it, and the pain that I felt and like the aftermath, I think was the worst part about it, was really like the shame for me and trying to like move forward from that, which I honestly didn't think that I would have carried as much as I did. But it definitely was I don't want to scare people, but it was worse than I thought it would be. During my follow-up appointment, actually, this is 16-year-old or whatever was there with her boyfriend, and then her parents were there. And the mom was sitting there talking about God and like the Bible and like how this is wrong. And like, okay, like your kid, I don't agree with it, but like do what you have to do. But like in a room full of women that have already made this choice or are making this choice, like that doesn't have a place here. So I was getting really frustrated because go do that privately. Like don't do that in a room full of women making this hard decision for themselves. Because she was being very loud about it too, you know, like causing a scene. You know, hearing people talk like badly about you and a choice you've made, that was a hard choice to make, or something that you're struggling with after, was just really, really messed up. So I think I carried a little bit of that with me too.
It confuses me that it's even like a thing that like people debate and talk about and like is on the news and stuff like that. I'm like, it's just a really personal thing. People should have access to this. Like it doesn't really matter to anybody else except the person getting the abortion, whether or not somebody gets an abortion.
Think about if you're in her shoes. Think about if your whole life was going to be flipped upside down in a way that you didn't plan. Think about, for example, my position having an abusive relationship causing a pregnancy, the trauma that you will live with forever. And stop being selfish. Like, you're not in charge of anybody else's life. Put your biases aside and understand that that person went through something that nobody ever wants to go through.
I think we as a society also say, well, you made this choice, right, to have sex or whatever, and you have this baby now, so you have to like give up your hopes and dreams and your life and your body and your everything for this thing because you've made that choice. And I don't think that that's true either. Like you get to decide when you do that. And if in that moment you're not ready or wanting to sacrifice like part of your life, because essentially that's what it is, like being a parent is a lot of sacrifice, and if you're not there and ready and wanting to do that, then you don't have to do that.
It's hard because I would never want to tell somebody like you should or shouldn't just because it's so personal. But having been through it, I feel like you do know. Like you might, know you want to get one, but then feel bad because there's such a stigma around it. Or maybe you already have kids and you feel like you should, especially if you're in a place in your life where you can financially support a kid, but like that doesn't mean you have to have one. You can have an abortion at any age for any reason. I know somebody who purposefully got pregnant with their partner, and then they suffered from terrible depression during the early parts of their pregnancy and decided they couldn't do it. And that's just as valid of a reason to get an abortion as, anything.
Everyone has their own story and their own reasons. And there's no right or wrong answer for one person.
Either way, it is going to be something that you will remember throughout your life and probably touch back on at different points throughout your life. I think it would be really hard to have made a decision too quickly or to have been influenced by someone else and then look back on it and have those regrets, because it's not something that you can undo.
While it may be the right decision, it will be something that sticks with you for the rest of your life. And I try to not think about it in a way that I murdered my child or something like that. Don't think about it that way. I think about it more like it's better off like this for me and whoever that child would have been. It randomly will come back to you on days that you don't even expect it. And just know that you will cry and you will feel a lot of guilt.
Definitely there was a lot of just shame for like a decision that I had made. There was some questioning of like, did I make the right choice again? And a lot of I was in therapy before, and I continued, I'd go to her and talk to her about, how I felt like I had killed my baby. I had like, made this choice that was wrong of me to like essentially take a life. And she was like, you have to like stop looking at it in that way of like that you've killed something. So I started to kind of change that. And I think I struggle a little bit with that now of like, I still made a choice to end a life, right? Even if it's not necessarily a viable life. With therapy, that helps me get through it, and kind of just processing it kind of like a loss, like a grief. Kind of, I like asked for forgiveness to it. I would like cry and talk to it. I like wrote a letter to it, and just let myself really grieve. I just feel like I have to reiterate this for people, but like it wasn't like I regret this grief. It was this was such a hard choice, but like I deserve to still grieve the loss of something, that I wasn't ready for, and that I knew I wasn't ready for, but something that I had to do and maybe in the future would want to be ready for. And I think that's what was hard too, was really deciding like, okay, well, when you have kids, does that make you selfish because you're choosing to do it when you're ready instead of like, this gift you had been given or something. Now I don't feel that anymore. I don't feel any shame or grief or sadness really about it.
There are a lot of people around nowadays that are like really against abortion, and like even saying things like it's like spiritually disabling for women to get this. Now when I like encounter those thoughts, I'm like, there's no way you could ever convince me of that, because I actually felt that it was spiritually elevating for me, because I was able to like make a decision and realize the things I was doing were out of alignment with my like highest self.
A move that's empowering for women and can actually be something that makes women feel strong because they made the best decision for them. Abortion is a form of self-care.
After I got the abortion, I felt very empowered. Like it was the first, I think, really big decision I had to make in my life.
I want to normalize talking about it. Like, I'm not ashamed of having gotten an abortion. Like, I made the correct decision for what my life is currently, and it doesn't matter what anyone else thinks. And I want people to know, like, if you need to get an abortion, one, you're not alone. So many people have had abortions. And two, like, it's nothing to be ashamed of. So honestly, 10 out of 10 would recommend, if anyone needs an abortion, do it.
I love them, and I love that they're an option for people who find themselves pregnant who don't want to be pregnant. I don't consider it to be a big part of my life. I like hardly ever think about having abortions. Ultimately, if I were to be pregnant again and not want it, I would get another one.
I don't view it as a scary thing anymore. I don't feel like there has to be all of the trauma and emotion connected to it. I think it can be just a choice that someone has to make.
And that misconception that like people that have them are drug addicts or get multiple abortions or like, can't take care of themselves or won't amount to anything. Like it's the same way that we stigmatize like mental illness or substance abuse, right? And people that struggle with that. I think a lot of people don't understand that. You probably know multiple people that have had one, and we are out here like doing bigger, better things for ourselves.
I would like to see people not be ashamed or embarrassed to share abortion stories just because it is so common. I didn't even know how common it was until I started sharing my story. Like I remember sitting with a group of my friends that were kind of new friends, and I had said like, "Oh, I've had an abortion." And one of them was like, "Oh, me too." And I was like, well, right on. Like, that's great. Like, that's half of us sitting here who have had abortions. Like, and, her story, similar to mine, just, didn't want to be pregnant. So had an abortion. I'm like, yeah, that's great.
Yeah, I'm definitely open about it. If someone opens up that they've had an abortion, I will definitely say, right there with you. Let's talk about it.
Me sharing with other people made them to oftentimes share that they've experienced the same thing.
The topic of abortion right now in the world is very sensitive. For me, there's a little bit of fear of sharing my opinion because what if I lose people in my life because of it? I am open about it. I think I could be more open about it. And that's kind of why I wanted to have this conversation today, because it's something that I've went through and I would love for somebody to be able to take something from my story.
I feel like it's something people think like, oh, I shouldn't tell people that I even catch myself, and I'm like super open about everything. I even catch myself being like, maybe it will make somebody else uncomfortable if I like share this about myself.
I think it's something that people are afraid to discuss. I also think it's something that people really put off onto, like, shelf off onto women and just say this is a women's issue. You know, people that may not be women or are scared to discuss it, I think, are easily quick to dismiss it in that way, which keeps the conversation closed.
You know, people posting things on Facebook and talking about it, like, I really stopped doing that because my mom's side of the family is so Christian that they would like attack me on them. And they don't know that I've had one, but it just became so triggering for me. And I think still is if people fight me on it. It does like make you feel like if my family knew that I chose to do that, would they love me less?
There's so many people that have had an abortion. Like, it's like a sensitive issue, and it's also not really anyone else's business but your own business. I'm not that sensitive, but there might be sensitive people out there that you could be really hurting their feelings trying to talk about this. So, yeah, there's a lot of insensitivity. So, if any insensitive people are hearing this, like, no, that is not a topic that you should just be openly debating, especially if you don't bear children. If you aren't going to have your body and your life pretty much permanently changed by having a child, you don't get to have an opinion.
There is 100% a stigma around abortion, and I have found that majority of the stigma is ran through male dominance, and the thought that women's bodies should be controlled by men, just like how it's always been in history. If you don't have a uterus, you can shut the fuck up.
Part of abortion that's talked about on the media is like you find conservative groups talking about how bad it is, when really, like, I don't know the exact numbers, but I would think it's around some 70% of Americans support abortion and support a woman's choice. So it's just unfortunate that what we see online and in the news is that 30% that, is anti choice, just because that's not the majority of people. And I think a lot of times people who have had abortions can shy away from talking about it because they think that that's the general opinion when it's really not.
I feel like there is a thought like, okay, after you've had an abortion, like you are the minority of people who have gone through something like this. And I don't think that's the case at all. I think there's more people in this world that have abortions, but it's just a very silent process. And that silence needs to be unsilenced. It's okay. Like it's a moment in time that you made a decision that was best for you, things that you add to your medical record, and then that's it. Like there's nothing more to it. There's not like this cloud hanging over you. There should never be judgment from somebody else. And if there is, and they're just not the right person in your life, it's a fucking hard decision and it's okay. Like you make that decision and it happens and you move on with your life. So you don't never feel like it's not okay or it's not allowed or you're alone. Like this is really important. There's so many different reasons that somebody could need one. If you don't have an option at all, I fear for just our future in that.
Something that should be available for everyone as a right. I know that if I was to be in that experience then or now, it would definitely be my decision. And the thought of not having that available is really scary.
I think it's absolutely ridiculous that there's actual fucking laws banning women from getting abortions when babies should not be brought into a world unless somebody is ready to take care of them.
I have so many qualms with about what pro-life means. It's like you want to bring this fetus into the world that doesn't even have a heartbeat yet. Meanwhile, you're not taking care of the people who are alive and like in the system.
Everybody should just have the choice to decide what they do with their body regardless of what it is. Like we should all have that autonomy to choose.
People should always be able to have access to the safe version.
I want people to know that abortion is normal and it's just a medical procedure people choose to have done. It can feel embarrassing to get pregnant when you're not planning on it. And that also goes back to there being such a stigma around like sex in general.
So hopefully, over time, when we do talk about it, people aren't, bringing up religion or things like that that get in the way of it, because I think that it's just like another medical thing. Like, you have a cold or you need to get your tonsils taken out. Okay, you don't want to have a baby. Like, okay, like that's fine. You don't need to do that. But I think that's like a whole societal shift, right? Of like how we view women in general and their purpose.
I want to see this conversation expand. Like, there is, like, growing up, we did have like a sex ed class. Like, we need to have this conversation when we're older in a controlled environment with a medical professional. And that's not something that I see happening right now, but I would love to see that happen because education is so important. Like, why aren't we being educated on real life things? And this is a very real life thing that we need more education on as a society.
Like a good resource that I've found is called Shout Your Abortion. They have a website and they have an Instagram page, and it's just people who have had abortions sharing their stories. And it's so comforting to see those sometimes, especially with all of the news media saying, like, oh, abortions are bad, you're a baby killer, which is just not scientifically correct at all. Um, but then, these, millions and millions of people who have abortions who are saying, you know what? No, like, I'm a good person. I made a medical decision for myself, and it was the best decision I've ever made.
I hope that the conversation over abortion just becomes way more normalized and accepted, and not just a conversation between women. Hopefully, it becomes a conversation between men, between women and men. I feel like it should be approachable for everyone to ask questions, to feel comfortable enough to like talk about.
Everyone's valid to have their own opinion, but everyone should be able to decide what they do with their body. Asking someone to go through a pregnancy and all the implications of a pregnancy is a huge thing to ask if that's not what you want for your body. And I don't think that that decision should be made just because some people feel uncomfortable.
I want to see the abortion conversation continue. I don't think it's something that should ever end. Like, this option is so, so important. And to be able to make the decision of whatever we want to do with our bodies should always be there.
If I were to get pregnant again next week, I would get another abortion.
It really was like, okay, your life is gonna go in one of two directions right now. It's like you're either gonna have this person's children who was like already mistreating you, or I have like all these other things that I'm trying to do and trying to focus on. And, you need to be choosing yourself. I feel like it was just an important like lesson that I had to learn.
And to this day, I don't feel like I made the wrong choice. I always knew along the way that what I was doing was the right thing, but right decisions can be incredibly painful and uncomfortable too.
So I mean, at the time, I knew it was best for me, and then after having my daughter so many years later, it like kind of confirmed that it was the best. Just because I feel like until you have a kid, you don't know how much they're going to take from you, like emotionally, mentally, physically. Like, they take everything from you. And I was like not ready to give that to somebody else when I was 20 years old.
I don't regret a decision at all. And I'm excited in the future, to want to one day have kids. And I think that when I do, that I will be way more ready than I ever was before when I was pregnant. I was a kid. And I think that no matter what anybody says, even at 19, like, you're still a kid trying to like figure out this life. I don't think that I would have evolved to where I'm at in my life or the person I am now if I would have continued on with my pregnancy and had the baby. That would have been my main focus, and I was still growing up myself. I'm very happy with the decision because I'm in a really good place in my life and I've worked really hard to get where I'm at.
I mean, I'm a firm believer of like, even through the painful things, we take it and move forward with it.
I have traveled a ton. I work full time, going to school full time, and I'm also just not out of my party stages yet in life. And so nobody wants a drunk mom.
There's been many times I have just imagined what my life would be like if I didn't get an abortion. I've gone to school. I've been able to travel. I spent almost a year traveling. Yeah, I definitely expanded as a woman and grew into my personality, grew into like my skills, and just found myself more.
Getting those abortions is definitely one of the best decisions I've made. Because of that, I was able to finish school, meet my husband, have my soon to be 2 kids, and so there's no comparison between the life I would have had and the one I have now.